Well, thanks for adjusting the time. It's 6 o'clock here and
Oh,
that, that's
Dinner time.
manageable. It's not the middle of the night. I'm so impressed with, I wish it was a public company. I go buy some. I'm coming to you via SpaceX
oh.
and it's amazing. I am in the middle of nowhere.
The what's that called? What that service called?
SpaceX, the Elon Musk.
Yeah, what's that internet? You're using their kind of modular internet connection, is that correct? Or
Well, I'm on a boat and the boat uses SpaceX to provide bandwidth. And then you can, I'm doing it through Google and Zoom, but
Starlink, right? Is that what it's
Starlink,
called?
that's it.
Starlink, you're
Yeah.
right.
I know somebody who who recently joined a group of friends who go to City of Rocks for like an annual Memorial Day camp out. And this one sort of quirky member of this friend group showed up with a Starlink device so that they could watch Netflix in their camper van in the evening or something like that, which, hey, sounds great. I'm sure everybody will be doing it eventually.
I've been streaming the Dead tour.
Yeah, there you have it. Yeah. Well, and I think there are vendors.
Chairman Powell went to the show the other night in Washington. Fed Chairman Powell was at the show.
Personally.
Wow. Yeah.
That's cool.
They got a shot of him and then flashed it up on the screen. It was Jerome Powell.
Nice.
Yeah.
I had a little confusion as to whether this is a Microsoft Teams meeting or Zoom, and I guess it's Zoom.
They're
All
always
right, okay.
Zoom.
I'll kill the other stuff.
Morning, Maury.
Well, John Byrne, what time is it where you are?
Not too bad. 6 o'clock. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I was just saying that I'm coming to you through the miracle of Starlink. From most people couldn't find the Ionian Sea on the map. It's absolutely the middle of nowhere, and an incredible internet service, probably better than my internet service at Alta.
The Ionian Sea.
The Ionian Sea in the middle of nowhere.
John, my middle name is Iona.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So
And how did they? Do you know the origin of that, Molly?
it was my grandmother's name. So I don't know the
Okay.
origin of her being named that, but I've always wanted to visit the Ionian Sea.
Is your heritage from that region of the world?
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That side of the family is kind of a question mark.
I presume Craig is scheduled to join us.
Yes,
Good.
I'm expecting him.
Mike, are you somewhere?
He's in his office.
Okay, I was going to say somewhere in the desert. And on slightly related topic, Mike, we changed the staff meetings to Thursdays instead of Tuesdays because we thought that might accommodate your schedule a little better.
Yes, it will. Thank you.
Well, I'm in gloomy Southern California.
Oh, I
No
thought the
worries.
puffy was a tell that you were in Alta.
No, it's colder here. No. We have a phenomena called either May gray or June zoom, depending on what month it is. June gloom, not June zoom, June gloom. Ah, there's Craig. And what part of the world are you in? Unmute.
I
There we
am,
go.
whoops. Yeah, I'm in London.
Oh.
Visiting middle son.
Okay. So we have representatives of the Eastern and Western hemispheres here. John was just telling us he's on the Ionian Sea.
A beautiful area.
Water is like glass out there. It's unbelievable. As far as you can see, not a ripple. It's like being on a pond.
Wow. Wow.
Really a lovely day. The only thing that's going to distract me from this meeting is if somebody yells, "Dolphin!"
Dolphin.
Everybody runs to their window or their balcony and looks at the dolphin. You never get tired of seeing dolphins at sea.
That would distract me too, here in Alta, for sure.
Okay, well, let us proceed. Welcome to the Alta Budget Committee meeting of June 7th, 2023. We're holding this without an anchor location. Pursuant to my letter of early this month about such things, and because we're scattered around the world. Thank goodness for Zoom. All right. I think we're going to start off with the current year budget. And Jen, are you going to lead the discussion on that?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to figure out if Elise was joining, but
Oh,
I'm not sure. Molly, you had asked, and I don't know I texted her a few minutes ago as a reminder, so I haven't heard back yet. So she'll join when she can, if she can.
Kind of makes sense to go through both budgets at the same time, don't you think? The way
Yeah,
the
and
pages go.
so just as an opener, for this meeting in particular, I did prepare one document for you, but for the next meeting, I'm gonna separate out, just due to the formatting requirements of the state, I'm gonna have separate documents for fiscal year 23 and 24. So one focused for each. Here is kind of my agenda for today of what I wanted to get through with everybody. I figured we could talk about the 22-23 budget and any questions anybody has regarding the year-end numbers that I have plugged in there. You know, again, these things could change modestly before the June 21st meeting or per any instructions that the budget committee gives me today. And I did want, you know, I have if you notice, there's a good contribution that I have plugged in there for the capital projects fund. So I'd like to talk about that specifically with the committee, and then talk about the tentative budget for 23-24. I figured we could hit on projects, the shuttle proposal memo that went out, the tax summary, excuse me. I have done some the rates for the water and sewer, which have not been shared with you yet. So I apologize for that, but we can talk about that today and then do some question and answers. Does that seem good with everybody? Okay, why don't we dive into the 22-23 budget then, and potentially year ends. Oops. Would it help you all if I actually pulled, I didn't do any specific summaries for this, but I can actually pull up the budget in Excel if you guys want to refer to anything. Okay. Let's stop and then reshare. Make sure I have the right one. Is that legible for everybody? Okay, thank you, Craig. I'm looking at your head usually, so. Okay. So I'm gonna try not to make you guys too dizzy as I scroll around in here. Expenses, sorry. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about with you, which is all the way down here, is this number here. This is that 100% test, John. We were talking about that a little bit earlier on the call. This is the 100% test. I don't think we would be forced to have to put this much money into the capital projects fund. But certainly based on this budget could do that.
What page are you on there? On the 116,
This would be, and I could actually, why
3.
don't I actually maybe pull up that PDF instead of the Excel. That might make it a tick easier. Because then you'll see those numbers.
It's like page 12.
Yeah.
Well, it's either page 12 or page 14.
12 on the bottom of the page there, yeah.
Right, 598, 665.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe you're all looking at my PDF now.
Mhm.
Do we, so, you know, for me, thinking about this contribution, I guess I feel like, yes, this is something to a certain degree that we, with that 100% test, are required to make a contribution, most likely. I really think that the town of Alta needs to be much more proactive in setting aside money for future capital improvements. Our buildings are aging. We're talking about a new community center. I think this is a really important action item for the council to be thinking about. And I know Craig probably has, he has his opinions on this too. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Craig.
Oh, very rarely am I going to pass that up. But I'm going to ask you to go back to that PDF and go to the first page, which is sort of
You
the
bet.
graphic summary, right?
Oh, this one. This one or the next page? That's the
No, the next page, the one that's
next
got
page. Gotcha.
the-
Yep, this one.
the
Pie charts.
pie charts, the
Oh.
Roger.
Oh, one back. Gotcha. There we go.
Jen, I don't think we're seeing what you're seeing.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I
sharing.
thought I was sharing, like I shared the wrong
Wrong-
screen. I
Yeah,
apologize.
you got the wrong screen there. I know.
There we go. Thank you. I think you guys
That's
see
the
it
one.
now. Okay.
Yep.
And so, I'm I want to set the sort of the context for how to think about, what we should do for tax increases and things like that, and how to think about the budget. And at the risk of being consistent, I want to point out that I think that one of the things that we can do that most improve governance is to actually think not in single year snapshots, but in multiple years. And I think that's really important. And Cliff has pushed back on one of the proposed potential tax increases. And in the memo that he sent around, what he did was he looked only at the operational budget. He didn't include the capital spend. And if you look at this numbers, I mean, roughly you got 3.4 million in revenue, and you got 3.8 million in expenses. So by my math, that is a negative $400,000. And why is that? Well, because we're starting to do significant capital projects. And you can see on the capital projects expense line here that $815,000 of it is actually in the capital project expenses. So if I take the operational budget only, yes, we're generating, roughly 400 grand. And that would be, money that would be available to make future types of expenditures. But I do believe that as we contemplate the budget, the most important thing that we need to think about is what are we going to do on the capital fund, on the capital expense side over the next few years. But I think that there are, some what I'm going to call organic sources of increases that are going to be needed. Those sort of fall into the following categories. One is we've got some very aging infrastructures in terms of our current buildings. We're either going to have to build new buildings or we're going to have to do, some pretty big expense items on, rockfall and things like that. Second thing is, and I want, the council really needs to think about this, is we know that the state has already appropriated $150 million for traffic improvements. And if they go to stage 3, which I think is not unlikely, they're probably going to spend another roughly $1 billion or so on a gondola. And one would hope that that would actually increase the number of users that we've had. So from, I think it was the last budget committee, might have been the one before that, I presented some stuff that said that we haven't even been keeping up with our depreciation, but what we're faced with is more than keeping up with our depreciation, because by the numbers that I'm talking about, we're going to have increased load on our infrastructure going forward. So we're not only going to have to replace and keep up with the depreciation, we're actually going to have to increase the capacity. So that's sort of the background to think about things in a multi-year sense, and not just look at sort of the operational snapshot. Any questions or comments about that?
Sounds
My-
exceedingly sensible.
Yeah, I buy into most of that. Maybe even all of it. Memory serves me right. The sort of the straight line depreciation number was a little over 400,000 a year.
Yeah, I think that's right.
One of the questions I was mulling about was, how are we haven't talked about the 100% test in a while. The limit on the general fund equal to 100% of our revenue. And if just a little quick math, I got that we're about 82 or 83% with this budget. I just a minute ago did a little math. I may not be right. God, don't hold me to it. But I think one place to start, I think we want to make sure that piggy bank is full. That's sort of our operating cash reserve.
Yep.
One of the reasons this budget works without and I think Jen has exercised good judgment in presenting this with the 0.1 and the property tax adjustment, but not the 1%, at least for now. Let's see how it looks. I think all the cards should stay on the table, but one of the reasons it works is because we're actually reducing the amount of what I think of as working capital. Our cash reserve in the general fund is actually going down by 100 grand next year. And then we're also projecting a much smaller CapEx contribution. So that's going down by about 50% from 600 to 300. And then I believe there's also 100 grand less of operating reserve. And so that's why, so there's $400,000. So that's why it's working without the 1% revenue room tax, if you ask me. And I'm not sure that's a great long-term strategy. I mean, we can, it's a bit of a Band-Aid approach solution, and we're making a lot of progress this year. So if that's what we want to do, that's what, Roger, you as the mayor want to do, great. But I do think it's important to recognize that that's not a great long-term approach.
Yeah, and John, let me just pile in for a second, which is, and really what I was saying is, in an environment where I think we're going to be seeing increased demand and load, we particularly ought to be reserving as much as we can for those capital projects, because I think they're with reasonable probability going to be spent. And if we want to do anything on a significant community center, we know we're going to have to beef up our contributions to those reserve type funds.
Yeah, and all I'm saying, and I agree with everything you just said. I just think in the background, there also needs to be paying some attention to what our sort of operating reserve balance is within the general fund. And obviously, we don't
Yeah.
be at 100%, but maybe it's something to think about, or Jen could think about, and we could discuss down the road. But to me, I would think that we'd want to stay between 80 and 90% of the limit. We want to know we're not over 100, but we don't want to see that fall to be 50% of what we could have in reserve.
Yep.
Right. So I think it's important. And we talked about, maybe on the next version, having a little test that told you what the ratio is at the end based on the expected revenue. Right. It's kind of a moving target, because if the revenue doesn't come in, the limit becomes lower. Right. Because it's limited. So it's going to have to, it's one relates to the other. And I just want to make the point that I think that's important too. While I wholeheartedly agree with you that funding the CapEx fund is paramount going forward.
So just can I maybe re-summarize what you guys are saying is that I'll provide information on projections for account balances, considering also what our general fund balance is. And what you're saying is we don't want to necessarily maximize what we can put into the capital projects fund, but consider kind of keeping that general fund balance close to like 80 to 90%.
And maybe Steve Rowley can give you some guidance on that. But yeah, that's my thought. And luckily we're at sort of 80%. So it's not another bucket we need to fill. I just don't think we should drain that reserve bucket to fill a different reserve bucket.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
And John, I think if I go back to your general comments, which I said we will definitely do, just couldn't quite get it all done for this meeting, which is, I think, a summary of what we're doing to all of the funds is really needed, including the general fund. And I think your point is, as we present that data, we should also present it as a percentage so that we are keeping, so that we're not bleeding down our rainy day funds, as it were, to pay for, that really should, in a large part, just be our buffer against the high variance stuff that we get out of the sales tax. And
the timing issues that Jen faces in paying our bills, which accrue sort of generally on a 12-month, a 12th per month basis, but the revenue comes in waves. And so she needs, there's real functionality to that reserve. It's not just, but yes, I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, it's your working capital is your point. It's working capital and it's our buffer. It's basically our working capital and our self-insurance fund against big variance in the sales revenue. So, and if we're bleeding it down to meet other CapEx type expenditures, that's not a good long-term practice. You can do it for a year, but.
And I think to some extent, we're doing that modestly this coming year in the 24 budget, because we're only projecting the $290,000 contribution, which is about half of what we've been contributing. We're doing that to try to ease into some of these tax increases, and I'm okay with that. But I think it's important to maintain that reserve fund.
Well, that's some good direction. Thank you. Are there other questions for the 23 budget that anyone has? The estimated year-end numbers.
Just flip through my thing here real quick.
If I could make a follow-up to what Craig led off with, that we are projecting more visitation in the future. And we don't have to project very far because that visitation is already on us. And that, subjectively, we're seeing more and more summer visitors. The winter visitors are more or less capped by the parking, but the summer visitors are going up and up. And one of the things we badly need are restrooms. And You know, we haven't even been able to fit a decent restroom at roughly at the trailhead into the budget yet. And yet we must do that. I mean, I think I'd like to get somebody to estimate how much human waste is being deposited in the summer because of the absence of restrooms. That's not my specialty. So I'm not unequipped to do that, but we are falling behind in infrastructure to accommodate a rising level of visitation.
I didn't have a lot of questions. There weren't a ton of substantive changes in the 23 budget. One that caught my eye though was the Marshal's Department is now being projected at $40,000 under the previously budgeted number.
Yes, based on actual numbers. And so I didn't,
I think that's equipment. I think it's equipment purchases we projected that didn't happen this year. I may be wrong on that, but I think that's what it was.
which number are you looking at, John?
I was looking at the one within the department. I mean, rally to find it here. Was within the Marshal's Department. So somebody could help me with the
I think
page
there was
number.
a trimming of the overtime budget, if memory serves.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, Police Department, this is 17, page 7 of 16. And the last time we adjusted the 23 budget, we were projecting 690,000. And I know that we're kind of back in the mind of we're not going to give mid-year raises. We're going to kind of do them all as part of the next budget. But we're spending 40,000 less than we thought we were going to spend in 2023. And that number didn't have a bunch of wage adjustment in it. So that was, I'm sorry, I was looking for the answer. Did somebody answer that question?
I have not answered the question. Mike actually answered it pretty similarly to how I would, but just saying, I'm looking at the actual year-to-date number, which is 543. And so I kind of was like, well, even if we had an emergency or something where we had to rely on some overtime in this month, essentially, I think would still be under that 650. I definitely don't take those reductions lightly because you can never go over. But I think that gives us plenty of wiggle room.
So the 690, we just got a little bit carried away.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I've tried to look into, how Piper did her projections of looking at existing wages and the overtime buffers and things like that. And we kind of, moving forward, have just scaled that back a little bit because it seems that we're often pretty far under our budget to a certain degree. And so I felt comfortable putting this number in. Mike, does this give you any sort of concerns? Because you and I haven't talked about that edit in particular.
Not on its face, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so our historic practice has been to budget for overtime coverage. And overtime's a little bit of a misnomer because we don't actually pay any of our employees overtime because we're exempt. With the exception of dispatch, but the past budgeting practice has been to budget as if every possible hour of PTO, vacation, and sick leave needed to be covered on an overtime or shift differential basis. And, in reality, that rarely happens. We come close, but we never really have hit that mark. So I don't think that the 40,000 is going to cause us to be over on payroll.
It's still, this is category 1054-110 for you home gamers.
Mhm.
You know, we're still $100,000 more than the previous year at 650. So that seems comfortable and reasonable, and so great. So I
Well-
just, since we're all neck deep in this one, so it's going to 770 in the next budget year. So it was 543. Now we're saying it's going to be 650 this year, but going up 30%, or it's not 30%, 20% to 768 next year. Feeling good about that number? Does that, are there pay increases in that are satisfactory to Mike Maury?
That's my understanding, but I'll let Mike speak to it.
Yeah, I think as we've, looked at the wage study and, met with the mayor, myself and Sarah separately, we've addressed individuals and the appropriateness of increases within the salary study. And I think the proposed budget reflects areas that we're comfortable with. It doesn't get us to, per se where we want to be, but I think it's a good interim step that we're comfortable with.
And are we assuming that that the department grows and we move away from our reliance on the exemption for paying overtime with the 5 employee? Or are we still assuming that it's 5 full-time employees and we're going to have use the federal exemption?
So the proposed budget does not provide any funding for additional staffing.
Okay, so we're going to continue to enjoy the benefit of the exemption.
Yeah, which, I noted that you didn't ask me if I was comfortable on that part of it. So I'll tell you, no, I'm not. We need more people, but that's a conversation for later.
Thanks, appreciate it. I deep dive into this number.
Which is, Mike's comment is consistent with the idea that we're having more and more visitors. And, that requires more and more expenditure on our services, of which public safety is high on the list.
I've always been concerned about our reliance on the exemption, in private work. I just think managing away from paying the employees overtime is just not generally a good practice. Pay the employee the overtime he deserves. I think in Mike's department, the history is such that, what they're getting is the 224s and the schedule that they want. And it's also made it work for the town to let them work those kind of schedules. So it's been great. And if we can stay there, great. But at some point, our growth is gonna mandate that we need to have more cops, and that's not a polite word. We're gonna need to have more deputies, and we just should be prepared for that, because it's gonna result in a significant amount of additional overtime being paid. Think that's right, John?
Yeah, and we've started those conversations. We just we need some more time, and Mike and I have talked about this being a focus for this fall, to start really diving into what we could do, what the numbers would mean, coming up with a proposal for consideration and stuff like that. So it's on our radar, and I think it's the right direction to move.
Well, there's two different factors here, or actually 3 different factors, right? One is the increase in the demand side that we talked about, that's coming from just more occasional visitors. So we understand that at some point, the increase in the demand side has to come up with an increase on the capacity side, on the supply side. So we're going to have to deal with adding people if the number of visitors continue to increase, and I suspect they will. Second thing is, as Jen commented, that I agree with you 100%. I think our practice here of using the exempt stuff is certainly not best practice. And I think we should probably, I mean, everybody's comfortable with it because we've been doing it, but it is non-standard. And I think at some point we should just move to the norms. And then last but not least is the fact that I think the model that we've got for projecting the overtime, which is more important than it would be with because of the exempt thing, is not fine-tuned yet, and Jen has been working on it. I'm sure this is better, but I think some additional work on that is probably needed.
Any other questions about the 23 budget? I feel like I've gotten some good direction so far on what we need to do for the year end. Okay, I guess let's move to the focusing more on the 24 budget, and I know they're all interrelated, so we talk about them all. But Chris, I think you were maybe gonna hit some highlights on the projects, and I don't know if you want to share your screen, or I have that document. I can go to it if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you, if you already have it up, why don't you keep sharing your screen and you can bring it up?
Okay. Just make sure I'm.
What page are we going for?
We're gonna go to the project document. Sorry, it's my space. There we go.
Oh, the project tracking document?
Yeah.
Well, and this may be my error, but the staff report that Jen emailed out does not appear to have the spreadsheet attached. But that's fine because
Oh, it doesn't.
we have not changed we've not changed in any significant way the project tracking document that we presented in the last series of budget in the May Town Council and Budget Committee meetings. The real message we wanted to make clear to the Budget Committee today on the projects is simply that a couple of projects, we're going to make some changes to the way a couple of the projects are budgeted for when we bring the final proposed budget to the council and the Budget Committee, or to the council, I suppose, in the June council meeting. So the four that I'm working on updating numbers for right now are the Alpha Central deck replacement. It was a maintenance project before. The scope and budget of that project need to increase.
There it is.
We think we essentially
Are you guys seeing that? I'm sorry.
yeah, we're seeing the project tracking sheet.
Okay, great. Okay. Do
Um,
you want me to go to the next page?
yeah, if you can go to the expanded view, it should just scroll down. That is just the expanded.
Why? Oh. Thought I had the right one.
Jen, I think it's fine.
Oh, expanded. You had two different documents in there. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
realize they were separate.
Yeah, okay. So if you want to just.
I don't think you are serious here.
No, we were seeing it. We were
Oh,
seeing
you
it.
are.
Yeah, we
Sorry,
saw
there's
it.
usually a green border so I can tell what you guys are seeing, and I'm having, for some reason, that's not showing up very well to me today.
Yeah.
You got
if you could
the
make
project
that-
tracking, right? It's very.
Yeah. Yeah, so this deck project, part of the strategy for creating maintenance buckets for small projects on our buildings was to reduce the amount of time we spent talking about such projects. But basically we thought we were going to replace the deck boards and the membrane below it. But we're concerned that we need to replace sort of other elements of the structure below the membrane. It's a really important structure. It protects the large diesel generator that provides power in emergencies to Alpha Central and the town office. And that structure is not watertight. We're learning. So we think it sort of exceeded our capacity to do the project in-house. So we're going to need to seek a couple estimates from contractors. So basically material costs and labor costs are going to go up. I don't think it's going to be a $25,000 project, which would, boost it into, another past a threshold in our purchasing policy. So I think we can do it expediently, get basically estimates in time to include an updated budget for that project in the final budget. So that's the deck. The community center feasibility study scope and budget, I think we're going to want to increase that. One reason is that frankly, we're not sure if we're going to get a product out of the architect we engaged to do an updated cost estimate. I have not succeeded in making contact with that architect, and John was having trouble doing so, before we sort of began the transition toward John's current role and my current role. So that logically will increase the amount of work we have to do in a community center feasibility study to develop like an opinion of probable costs for a new design. So anyways, that's something I need to wrap my head around in order to develop a new budget. We have 50,000 in here currently. The previous community center feasibility study, we spent $75,000 on. So somewhere between 50 and 75 is what I'm contemplating proposing for a budget for that project.
And what year are you proposing to do that?
I think we're still hoping to do that next year.
Now, which line are you talking about? That's not the 7K that's in the first group, is it?
It's this
No,
3,000. It's the third one down.
those are miscellaneous expenses for the current community center. That's the $7,000. So the community center feasibility study appears in our decision 24 project category. It's the third project down, funded out of the capital projects fund at $50,000. So that's the way that appears in the project tracking sheet now.
I still can't spot it.
Jen, why don't you just scroll down a little bit, and it's now kind of in the second grouping of projects up from the bottom of the page.
Oh,
Shared
here we go.
screens.
Here.
Okay, got it. That
Community
50K,
center.
got it. Yeah.
Chris, I wonder if you might touch on the generator issue.
Yeah, that is, any other questions on the community center feasibility study proposal?
Well,
Okay.
just a comment for the record, I suppose. I want to see us build a community center badly, but I also personally, I think that with our limited resources, we're really a man down. With you taking John's job, we haven't replaced you. There's a lot of wood to chop in the CapEx world. To kick that out another year or two, the study, I mean, it's just such a sinkhole of time. And do we really want to be allocating millions of dollars to it when we haven't made more progress on our infrastructure? Is, I guess, just my comment.
Fair
Well,
comment.
I don't see, John, are you suggesting that that 50K for the community center design is ill spent at this point? I don't quite get the thrust.
Yeah, I mean, I guess doing another study doesn't bother me terribly. Engaging and building the building, that bothers that I would say. I think it's important to get some momentum going on these capital projects and see where we are. So if that expense slid to the 25 budget year, I personally wouldn't, the study money slid to the 25 budget year, I personally wouldn't lose any sleep over it, because that would give us a little breathing room to A, restaff the office, and B, get some momentum on some of this project's execution. Craig, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, look, I think that we've historically underspent our capital projects allocation. Your point is that we're a man down this year. And if you remember at the last budget meeting, I pushed Chris pretty hard on, let me see, you got a 10 times, it wasn't 10 times, I think it was about 8 times increase in your capital budget. Are you really going to be able to do all that? And now that we're a man down, I think that is quite questionable. That said, John, I really do believe that because this is just the planning project part, I think spending longer on the planning project and starting it earlier is not a bad idea. I don't know that means we're actually going to complete it this year. And what I'm hearing from Chris is this is going to be more work than we thought, just to start it, because we're not going to have continuity. So I think you're going to have to spend something this year and get it going. And, if it's less than the 50K because we only get it going halfway through the year or only get half of it done, I think we want to keep it as a placeholder. But I think that net, we're going to end up doing what you're saying, which is it's going to be kicked into the next year. And that means that, we would probably delay the decision on whether to build it as well.
Right. The 24 budget year ends next June. So, to say, well, we're going to do it in the 25 budget year, to me, that could mean September of 24 or October of 24.
Yep.
I do think that the generator is a big issue. I know it was really a problem for dispatch. I'll just throw it out. I have a gas generator and I love the thing because you never have to fuel it. It's always fueled. It's on the gas line. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think our concern this year was the damn thing wouldn't auto start.
Yeah. So I guess just two more comments on the community center. I think Craig and John both made really valid comments. I think our sense of urgency with doing, or at least beginning, a feasibility study during the upcoming fiscal year is sort of twofold. I mean, one is the state of the current structure. And the other is that we need to understand what it's going to cost in order to begin to plan for the expense. And I know, Craig, we had 6 months ago or so, perhaps in our capital projects meetings, Craig had suggested we try to have a cost estimate for the new facility that we want to build. Not necessarily for an updated version of the facility we thought we might build in 2003, but a new cost estimate for a new facility in February of 2024 in order to inform the budget process for fiscal year 25. And the closer we get to February 24, the less likely that feels. But I do still think that replacing one of our 3 buildings is going to be the biggest expense the town of Alta has ever borne. And so wrapping our heads around how we're going to pay for it is an urgent matter for us, I think. But absolutely fair comment, John, about our staffing levels. The number of projects we're proposing to do next year, and in the, to segue into the generator project, that is certainly an urgent project. It has failed in a couple of power outages this year. And it's showing signs in less urgent times that it really does need to be replaced. So we did get a bid on a new one. And we understood that the unit they were proposing had an 11-month lead time. So under our purchasing policy, we need to get at least another bid. And see if we can possibly get one sooner. Of course, it's complicated because that project will best be done without a snowpack on the ground. So if we can't get one before November 1st or so, let's say December 1st, assuming that, we can plow the road if necessary to do a project like this, then we can't do it until the following spring. So that's an urgent project, and I think we might as well move that up into the proposed 24 category when we update this document. And finally, it's really a small item, but playground equipment upgrade project. I haven't actually been down to look at the park. I mean, there's a lot of snow out there. It's melting off nicely, but there's a lot of snow out there, and we're not gonna have the park set up by June 30th. We're gonna have the park melted out in order to evaluate a project until next fiscal year. So we'll just move that to also Decision 24 projects.
I agree with everything you just said, and it's interesting. Just as we, put our toe in the water on these things, it really demonstrates the need to project future cash balances. Like, trying to decide whether we have the 50 grand for this study, or, it's hard for us to say, wow, we're going to spend 50 grand on this study to build a building for $3 or $4 million, or $10 million, or $20 million, or more. And it's just so hard to make those decisions without an estimated future CapEx fund balance. Just highlights that for me.
We promise we'll do that, John. I'd sort of hope to have it by this meeting, but we don't. Maybe we'll have it by the June meeting. We'll certainly have it for anything after that. And that's a point well taken. I do want to push though and emphasize one thing, which is I really think it's important that we have at least a rough idea of what the community center is going to cost. Because we keep having the debate of, well, do we spend 125 grand on the rock fall, and how much more money do we spend on maintenance? And, if it's a $3 million building, that will be one set of decisions. And if it's $10 million, it might be different. But I think we got to get that rough order of magnitude nailed down, this year, before we have to make those decisions on sort of the maintenance and modest capital improvements versus the rebuild.
One thing that I don't know if Chris was going to highlight this, but it's been a project I've been working on that I've recently passed off to Chris to continue to be the manager on. But we have installed 25 out of the 28 remote meter systems at Powder Ridge, and I'm just so happy that finally happened. They're actually installed. So we're making headway on that. It's great. I've been talking about this for a few years now. So really stoked on that. I just wanted to report that we're getting it done.
Right on.
Good move.
I think next we were going to talk, Chris, you're done with the updates on the projects, correct?
Yes, that's all I had to say, and then some. So.
Okay. Next, we had the, just to hit on the shuttle proposal on the agenda.
I was just gonna say, sorry, I jumped on a little bit ago, but sorry I was late. I don't know if many of you guys know, but we have a big season pass deadline happening today at Alta, our first and biggest one. So I just had to go deal with some sales stuff, but that is good news for anything that comes in for revenue for the town. So
Oh, good point.
Pass deadline at the end of the day today. So sorry I was late, but
Thanks for joining us, Elise.
yes.
There you go. We have a little real-time revenue projection intelligence. So thank you, Elise. Yeah, well, I just we sort of got our heads together following the May meeting, the May council meeting, in which some council members expressed concerns about the potential administrative burden of the town taking on the shuttle program for one season or however many seasons. And so I put together this rough estimate of tasks and time budgets for those tasks that we think it will take us to effectively take over providing the shuttle program in a similar manner to the way that that program's been offered in the past. I don't want to take too much time to, describe for you all once again the way that program has been operated historically, the way that the 3 service programs were arranged and funded last year. These time budgets may be slight underestimates, but I don't think they're underestimates by an order of magnitude. The real work to provide the shuttle program is is done by the contractor or the vendor who, operates the shuttle program. The work that we'll need to do and are doing is fundraising, it's town council meetings and meetings with stakeholders. Because we're a public entity, we'll need to go out to bid for an expense of this magnitude. I think it's worth reminding you all that, the projected expenses for the shuttle is about $230,000. So that's a huge expense. It's a bunch of money flowing through our accounts. So we will have to go out to bid, whereas previously, Dan Kettner or Alta Chalets did not. So we will have to do that, and that will add some time and some administrative burden. It will take some time to review proposals. And then managing a contractor or vendor is a little bit of an unknown based on who we get. If, the previous vendor, Alta Shuttle, were to win that contract, we assume it wouldn't take more time to manage the service than it has in the past. I don't think it would take a great deal more time to manage a new vendor, but I'm sure it would take a little bit more. And then, the big one to me, the big unknown is how much time, assuming that we manage the shuttle program this upcoming year and the town decides we want to keep, we want that to remain a town program, we have to put some time into identifying other ways to fund the program, because funding it based on donations from private entities around town is not sustainable. A big chunk of the funding for the program this year is going to come from the ACVB bank account once we dissolve ACVB. So that's a 1 year, that's a 1 year funding source. So it's going to take some work to figure out how we would fund the program in the future, but we don't know how much at this point. So anyways, that was really the purpose of having that on Jen's agenda and providing that staff report to you. I don't know if you all have any questions or comments about that.
So let's translate this into dollars. This is 50 or 70K or so.
Of administrative costs,
Yeah.
46 to 70 hours. No. No, Jen, do you want to wager a?
Well, I mean,
prediction?
It's,
I'm sorry.
it's a couple of weeks salary.
Yeah, it's a couple
And
of
because it's a couple of weeks salary, our total loaded costs are maybe 150. So you're not talking about a tremendous amount of money.
between 2,500 and 5,000. That's
Yeah.
that's a pretty big
Sounds
range,
good.
but that allows for a lot of room.
But
I just have a
Go
quick
ahead.
question. The shuttle, again, with our season pass sales, are we confident that we are going to be managing this shuttle program this coming winter? Are we still not sure? We're just kind of getting this out to bid and seeing, or are we pretty sure that this is something that we are going to be putting out to contract?
So Elise, where we're at currently is that staff is proposing we do this. And
Okay.
we're trying, and basically with the adoption of the fiscal year 24 budget, that would secure that.
Okay, the reason I'm
Thanks.
curious, our biggest question we get when people are buying passes right now is if the town shuttle is going to operate again. And all of our people answering phones are saying that it is. So I also feel that we should be doing this. I just wanted to make sure that's where we were at.
Yeah, I guess the rest of the council members and budget committee, I think this is the recommendation coming to the council, and it's up to the council ultimately though to make that decision here in the next couple of weeks.
But it's in the budget, but at a sort of a net cost, revenue less expense of sort of $30,000 or $40,000,
Right.
not counting the whatever math is behind the hours that Chris just showed, because we're not really going to hire another person. But just the sort of the basic nuts and bolts, it's going to cost the town 30 or 40,000 to do. So it's not without, and really the value in taking it over will be that we'll hopefully figure out eventually how to structure it so that we can apply for grants for the rolling stock. Because that's what really tripped up Alta Shuttle, was that their vans ran out and they didn't have, because they're a for-profit entity, they didn't have access to any grant money. And it's going to take an organized effort to realize that feature of us taking it over. But I think that's probably one of the most compelling reasons to do it, because ultimately we should be able to materialize some grant funding.
I find it fascinating that Elise says that one of the biggest questions they're getting is the shuttle going to operate. I mean, that's an indication of its value to the community.
I agree. And I just want to make one comment. So I believe what we're projecting to spend out, net town of Alta expense on the shuttle this upcoming year is actually $26,000. And I'll just, highlight once again that somewhere on this picture is that we're not budgeting to spend any money on ACVB. So it's less money than we were proposing to spend on ACVB this year.
I do want, so the memo that Chris prepared was somewhat in response to Sheridan's question, but I think it's an important discipline that we need to implement going forward for most of our major projects. John, you made the earlier comment about we're man down. Historically, we haven't been, we've overestimated what we could actually execute. I think we need to improve that. And I think the fundamental way that we'll improve that is by actually doing manpower allocations to it, so that the town council is allocating not just the money for the projects, but actually a full understanding of how much of the staff time is going into that. So that's something we'll work on over the next year. And I think that's an important part of improving our ability to project what we can actually get done.
Yeah, good point.
Are we okay to move on from the shuttle?
Mm-hmm.
So I sent out a summary of the three taxes that the council's asked to consider for this coming year, which include the property tax increase, the resort tax, which is the 0.1%, and the municipal transient room tax of 1%. This first page was just a summary of, sorry, that thing popped up, of what each of those taxes could generate in new revenue. Okay. Any questions on that piece or the background? Okay. Then just for the, speaking specifically to the property tax increase, we had historically been at a roughly $400,000 figure. And then a couple years ago, when the town contract for fire services, I'm going to overly summarize this, but when we switched from the town paying for the fire service to it being levied on the property taxes to the community members, there was part of that process involved a $150,000 reduction in property taxes to kind of compensate the property owners for the additional amount that they would be paying on their property taxes. And so what we're kind of doing is going back to a historic property tax rate, which is the $400,000 here. Chris, would you have said any of that? Did I say anything incorrect when I summarized it that way? Correct?
I think you got.
I'm
the
sensitive
important
to
points.
this
I mean, you
issue,
did say,
so.
you mentioned a property tax rate, but then what you actually stated was an amount of property tax revenue, and you're getting the point across, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what Chris and I did kind of put together here in this table, just so that we can understand what our current rate is, what the proposed, and this, I did actually get some updated numbers yesterday from the county, but haven't been able to crunch them yet. But if our revenue is what the preliminary revenue was that I had from earlier in June, this would be, to generate the $400,000, this would be the new certified tax rate here. I need to finalize that with the county data and everything, so that could change by June 21st. So just pointing that out, but this is the number that I'm going on for the purposes of doing some comparisons. It's probably very close to what it will be. And what we've done here is kind of basically shown a whole bunch of comparable locations so that you can see the effect basically to the property owner. At the bottom, I include just kind of that summary of like what this means per $1 million in valuation to folks. So, you know, we're only talking about a $361 increase per $1 million in valuation to homeowners. So I think this kind of piggybacks on the comment that Roger was making at the last council meeting, where he said, you know, this is a big increase to the town's budget, but for the individual property owner, it's less so.
Yeah, but it's about a 50% increase. I mean, if I look at these two numbers in the top left, from 682 to 1043, it's about a 50% increase in the sales, in the property tax.
In the certified tax rate, yes. But
Right.
we have not done truth and taxation for 3 years, I believe. It might be 4 even, so. So these jumps get bigger when you have a bigger span of time in between.
Yeah.
Doing them. And that's why some municipalities will do them every year, every other year. Waiting 3 or 4 years makes it harder. And
Makes the
those
jump
jumps
bigger. Mhm.
So,
You said homeowners, but it's really all property taxpayers.
yes,
Right, right.
thank you.
Yeah. It's just, we homeowners feel it.
Yes, certainly.
Right, because of the whole valuation and tax equalization issue, which
Yeah,
someday
I
it'd be great to address the tax equalization issue, but probably today isn't the day.
Right.
So that's kind of a, you know, hopefully this is a helpful document for the council and for the public to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about this property tax increase. And then we have 2 sales tax increases that I've provided information on, one being the 0.1% resort tax and the other one being the 1% municipal transient room tax. These charts basically show how those taxes, this is current here, and then this is proposed. So you can see that the resort tax would be would be applied to both the retail sales and the transient room lodging purchases, but the transient room tax would only be applied to that one kind of category. And so you can see what our end result here is if we imposed both of those taxes. And then just for some comparison, we also provided a handful of comparable communities. And these are their current rates. So I don't have included in here whether they're proposing increases to their structure. Or whether they may have already maxed out. I didn't do that analysis for each of these communities, but it just, you can see, you can rate where our optional total would be, you know, in this chart if you wanted to see, you know, we're at the top end. I will acknowledge that, but we do have that ability to impose these additional taxes.
Oh, not really at the top end, are we? I mean, Park City is higher than us.
Yes, but if you look statewide, we're,
Oh.
we're,
Well,
I
yeah, but
only have
that-
a small group here, but if you look at all of the data,
But I-
we're on the higher end, for sure.
But you know, this whole argument that the statewide is what matters is really kind of a struggle because you're including a bunch of
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
farming communities that it's just really completely irrelevant.
So
You
that's
know,
where-
I think the selection of cities that you picked here makes a lot more sense to me than comparing the statewide rates. And we're not the highest, but we're on the high side. But you know what? We have the smallest population of any of these places.
by a long shot, yeah.
And there are also on the statewide list, you know, lots of larger communities with more complex economies and, you know, exponential economies of scale compared to what we're able to do with our potential revenue sources here.
Including property tax base.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And if I were-
Bigger places have enormous property tax bases, you know, in some cases, Salt Lake's got billions of dollars of property tax base.
Right.
No,
Yeah, Jennifer, if I were to add any row in your comparable sales tax, I would put in Bryan Head, which is kind of more analogous to us than the others, if you can get that data easily.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question was, looking at this document, having reviewed it, is there additional information on any of these taxes that anyone would like to see?
Well, I don't, I think at some point, so probably not before the end of June. The real issue here is what's our total tax take from the town? And I think my guess is we're getting a lot lower percentage of our budget from property taxes than other people are. We compared the rate, but we didn't compare the total take. And my guess is like Park City probably gets a tremendous amount of revenue from property taxes as a percentage of their budget. So I think the point is we may have to be higher on some of these things because we effectively have more limited on the traditional property tax that sustains the much larger communities.
that's really the property tax base issue, right?
Yeah. And we have a rate comparison in here, but not a base comparison. And if we do the base comparison, I'm pretty sure it's like, yeah, okay, you know, we got to get the money from someplace. Mhm. And then the slight increases that we're talking about, really, I don't think will be put in the appropriate context.
Yeah, my bottom line on this, just throwing it out there, is I think that the path that Jen has outlined where we don't go ahead with the municipal transient room tax hike this year and we do the 0.1, the property tax, it's just, we have to do that. And I agree with her that we should probably be doing it every year or every other year so that it's less of a sticker shock. The 0.1 I think is just a layup. You know, and we definitely can't turn away from the 0.1 and turn away from the 1% transient room tax. You know, if we decide that, you know, these two are enough, we're going to squeak through, okay, but it's not a great long-term strategy because in the 24 budget, we're reducing by nearly 50% our contribution to the CapEx fund. And, you know, we just spent a bunch of time talking about all the CapEx projects we need to do and where they need to go. And we need to ramp up our effort to spend the money. And maybe we want to build a community center for a bunch of money. To be reducing our CapEx contribution, it has been a couple $100,000, nearly 50% above the sort of the long-term depreciation number, which is 400,000 roughly. Forgive me if I'm not getting it to the penny, but our fixed asset charge is like $400,000. We'll be contributing $600,000. That makes some intellectual sense to me. That says you're going to make progress versus the straight line depreciation over time. we're now going to reduce our contribution to the CapEx fund because we're not going to do this additional tax to a level that's below the long-term need as defined by straight line depreciation of the assets. So that's not a winning strategy. We can do it this year, but it's not a great strategy in the long run. And then also, if I did the math right, I think we're reducing our sort of general fund reserve balance, not the CapEx fund balance, but the fund balance in the general fund by about 100 grand. So we're going to have 100 grand less in our working capital fund, and we're going to reduce our CapEx expenditure contribution to the CapEx fund by 50%, all in an effort to avoid this 1% transient room tax. I mean, we're going to be talking about this again next year, and I just don't think it's great. It's not great financial management, but you know, it's maybe what the right thing to do is today, but it's not a long-term
Yeah.
winning strategy.
John, I'm very similar to you. I would say I object to not increasing the transient room tax at this point in time, because if you take a multi-year view, it doesn't make any sense. That said, on a practical basis, I'm perfectly comfortable doing it for 1 year. I suggested before that that I should write a response to Cliff's memo, you know, a formal response to Cliff's memo. And then I didn't do it because if we weren't going to do the increase in the transient room tax, I really didn't think it was needed. That said, based upon the discussion today, where, you know, we've laid out sort of the philosophy of, you know, we need to do multi-year, we should not be drawing down out of a reserve fund, and some of the comments that I made, you know, at the very beginning, I'm starting to think we should write a response to Cliff's memo to get this stuff actually in the record so that we start to no, Cliff, I'm sorry. You're looking at a 1 year operational snapshot only. You're not even including this year's capital expenditures. Based on that, we're actually 400 grand underwater, and we're doing it by drawing down the stuff. So I think I can write that in relatively plain English. It will take me a little bit to do that. But I do think that the comments you've made, John, and the comments that I started out with, that's why I said, in principle, I'm against it. But at a practical level, if you want to do it, Roger, absolutely fine. It's not going to make that big a difference. But let's get the stuff on record so that people understand how we're thinking about this stuff and why, even if in a year when we have an operational surplus, we want to increase taxes.
Wait, Craig, you asked me whether I wanted to do what?
To have me write a
Oh,
formal
yes.
response to
Yes.
Cliff's memo.
I think being on the record is appropriate. I mean, Cliff, I believe, distributed his objection rather widely. And I think it would be good practice to offer the counter to that, similarly distributed.
Yeah.
I think we also have a responsibility to make sure people understand what's really happening, which is we're getting through this, not doing the 1% because everybody's got themselves worked up into a tizzy. But to make that work, we're reducing our funding of the CapEx account by 50% this year.
Yeah.
And that just makes no intellectual sense to me whatsoever. And we're going to skinny down our operating reserve. That's at 80-something%. It's already not 100%, not really threatening 100%. So I think it's just not a great long-term strategy. You know, ultimately, Roger, it's your choice as to what you put in the budget. This isn't like I mean, I can go with the flow. I'll support the budget as you've presented it here, if this is what you decide to take to the council. But personally, if you say, what would my preference be? My preference would be not to underfund the not to avoid the institution of the 1% transient room tax by underfunding our CapEx account.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you know,
I would see you change it and have it be in the budget when it goes to the council. And if somebody wants to make a motion to remove it from the budget, they can make a motion to remove it from the budget. We'll talk about it, and ultimately there'll be a vote. But if you
Right,
don't
I
put
mean-
it in, we're never going to be able to argue and make it happen at the council level.
I mean, these tax rate increases, I would analogize to taking castor oil. And you know, what's the difference for taking 2 teaspoons, 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons? You're gonna take the castor oil and you need 2 teaspoons, take 2. Maybe you guys are too young to remember.
No,
castor
I-
oil.
we got that.
Yeah, I don't think they use castor oil.
We got the analogy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I think specifically, Roger, that means you have to decide if you want to include the transient room tax in the budget or not. I think Roger's right. I'm sorry, John's right, that if you don't have it in, it won't get discussed. If you do have it in, somebody may make a motion to remove it, and that would be a healthy discussion.
Yeah, Elise, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this.
I mean, I think, I know when we were talking about these 3 options for tax, you know, we talked about maybe doing one or a couple or all of them. I mean, I do think that doing all 3 options might be a little intense, but I don't see any reason why we can't put them in the budget, like John said, and have a discussion at the council level about whether or not we do the transient room tax combined with property tax. You know, like I said, I think we should have a discussion with the other town council members about this. As a budget committee, we kind of try to recommend a budget and then we kind of let the council make a decision on it. Like I said, if we have this in place, maybe we don't adopt the transient room tax and maybe it happens in a year or 2 from now. But I think we do owe it to the other town council members to weigh in on it.
Okay. So, and if it's not on the table, there's no opportunity to weigh in it. So let's have it on the table.
So my next version will include all 3 of those the
Yep.
additional new revenue for all 3, and then
Yep.
I'll figure out I might just have like 2 versions, one with and one without. And so that essentially the contribution to the capital projects fund would probably be 2 different numbers.
Right, that would be cool to have an exhibit that demonstrated what the effect is gonna be of
Mhm.
not adopting it, in terms of, even if you want to ignore this relatively small change in our general fund year-end balance, it's a question of how much money we're gonna put in the CapEx fund and the relationship of that to the long-term depreciation of the assets, which is a lot less theoretical now than it used to be. You know, when the town got built, you say, oh, 20, 30 years from now, we'll worry about it. You know, it's 20 or 30 years later, and the assets, the physical assets need repair and replacement. And so to underfund even the straight line depreciation just doesn't make any, it's undisciplined.
Okay, I think we're good on that. Here, I'm gonna go back to. Okay, water and sewer rates. So, the bottom line, I guess, on this is, and maybe just as a little bit of background, John, when I was doing my budgets, I did consult your budget tools. I didn't follow them perfectly, but I certainly considered them and tried, you know, I mean, those are working documents, as is the budget. And so I've tried to, well, I consider those, and I'm not that far off of what you had in both the water and the sewer. I will comment that the sewer jump is a little higher than what you had anticipated and what I thought we maybe needed to do, but that's just due to disposal costs. So, I mean, the bottom line, I think, really here for our customers is this is their current, we bill on a quarterly basis. So if I think about what our customers are gonna see, with this proposal is for basically a $40 increase per quarter. So roughly per month, it's a $14 increase. And so going from $315 per quarter to $353. I did increase the overage by 20% here. It's a 72-cent increase per 1,000 gallons. And that was based on just when I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but we did some work to equalize the payment between the residential and the commercial customers. They were actually paying different rates per gallon of water. And so we equalized that. So both commercial and residential are paying the same amount. When we did that just to lessen the burden, we actually reduced the overage rate. And so, but with the understanding at the time that the council would slowly build that overage rate back up. And so this is a 20% increase on that overage rate. I guess I'm not sure what else you want me to point out about this proposal here
Well,
on water rates.
One thing I would ask, Jan, is that you let off this morning, wherever time zone you're in, mentioning that we're getting the water meters installed in Powder Ridge, and I think West Grizzly was the plan too. Is that right?
Not, well, I mean, the entire town over the course of 3 years, but West Grizzly is the next phase.
Right. And how will that affect any of this?
Not much, because we're paying for that, because that's an infrastructure upgrade. And so that's being paid out of the capital reserves that we've saved up and are continuing to save up. So that is not going to have a direct increase to the rates outside of the amount that we put in the budget to put into reserves.
No, my point is that, okay, now we're going to measure water to the place you were staying in Powder Ridge. Is that going to change the revenue from that unit?
Well, so what's going to happen is that our readings are going to be, we've had a problem in town where many of these meters are located in remote locations, or they're hard to get to, because of our snowpack in Alta, meters are not located outside homes in many instances. And so getting inside people's homes to read meters is a challenge. This system corrects that, where we get daily inputs, and we're going to actually, in places like Powder Ridge, we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing as far as reading the meter every month. And so what happens is that you read the meter more intermittently across a calendar year, and you have to average it out because you can't overcharge someone. So we basically, to a certain degree, yes, everyone is paying their base ECU rate of $315, but we did not, we often, in many places, we did not have customers paying overages because we were using averages over multiple months of meter reads. So our overage rate, this is less of an issue with the commercial establishments, but on the residential side of things, we will likely see an increase in overages. I don't
And
know what the
therefore-
significance of that is gonna be until we start getting some data. But I anticipate, I don't see many residential properties, the ones that we do get consistent monthly meter reads going over. So I don't think it's gonna be significant, but we will have some increase in revenue.
But it's not an increase in the water rate. It's just a more timely reading of the meter.
Yes.
So
I think from what I would distill from that is that this will be an insignificant change or a minor change in our revenue from our water rates, from our water sales, right?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
So that's water. And here's my chart on sewer. And so you can see here that I should have explained this at the beginning, but in determining rates, the process for that is you take the total ECU value and you divide that between your customers. And so and this applies to both the sewer and the water. So last year we had a target revenue of 144,000. This year, mainly due to the disposal costs, and we kind of recognized a little bit of an increase last year. It's a scaled approach on their disposal costs increase. So we're gonna see even more of an increase this year. So the revenue we need to raise from these rates is $175,000. This results in maybe I might have done my verbal wrong on the monthly change on water. The $14 actually per month applies to sewer. You can see here the end result for the customer being billed on a quarterly basis is going to go from $196 per month to the $237 here, which is a $40 increase.
That per month or is that
I think I was
quarter?
going off memory and applied the sewer numbers to the water. I hope I didn't create any confusion on that last
I mean,
slide.
I think it was a similar number, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So you said monthly, but you're talking about quarterly, I think.
Right, so we send out bills quarterly,
Yeah,
but essentially there is a monthly rate. So the monthly rate is that bottom piece here,
right.
but the bill that the customer sees on a quarterly basis is this number here. So that's kind of, I think that's how people think about. But if you're doing your annual budget or whatever, I included these numbers too. So you're gonna see from 785 to 950 for your water or for your sewer, excuse me.
the only thing I would add to that is the $175,000 number you see there includes in it a capital charge or a contribution to the sewer capital reserve fund. So that's not really separate. It's like in that number. So we are continuing to build the sewer fund, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Not by much.
Not by much.
Like
It's
by $100 is all I have actually, which is completely insignificant. I basically would say we're not doing anything with this number. And so
this is really just covering the increase in expenses that we're experiencing in operating in paying our share of the sewer expenses.
And so because this increase was kind of more significant than I thought it was going to be, I didn't in this draft put in a number for the infrastructure replacement, but we should definitely talk about that. And I mean, that will make this rate go up, but I haven't been playing around with these numbers very much, as you can tell, because you've just gotten the data.
Reduce the capital charge that was in the model just so that the increase would be more manageable. In the sewer fund, that doesn't bother me really because we have not much on the horizon in terms of work to do there. and there's a significant fund balance. In the water fund, we have a mountain of work to do, which probably starts with us, revaluing those projects. The estimates are all from like 2000 and 2011 or 2014. So the sewer fund not having a big CapEx charge doesn't bother me, built into the rate, but whatever charge you have, let me say it differently, whatever capital charge you're having is built into this number. As you go, just for people to think about.
I mean, do we want to, I mean, I could run numbers for like a $25,000 contribution to infrastructure replacement. I mean, I feel like we should be doing something, even if it's $10,000. Is there a certain number that you guys feel is right for putting into capital?
Well, I feel that the number 0 is wrong. So, which is kind of where we are now, because we know that there will be repairs and replacement down the line. So we might as well acknowledge that quantitatively.
I mean, the sewer rates have changed very little historically. Those rates have been very flatlined.
I think it's all, I looked at them through the same lens, but really it's two different pictures. The sewer fund has a pretty decent capital account. I agree we should be doing something. Maybe $10,000 is the number, but at least something. But the water fund, it's pretty clear that the water fund doesn't currently have adequate reserves. And that's what drives those rate increases you see in the model as you go into the out years. Is, at some point, we're going to have to pay the piper. So the water fund is not in the same super strong position that the sewer fund is in.
Yeah, we have an $84,000 contribution in the water fund too.
That
Capital
seems
improvement.
great. That seems great to me.
Have we had an outside expert inspect our sewers recently? And, just give us an opinion on the stability of the infrastructure and whether we're going to have to do major projects.
I think the expert, I think Stevie was the expert, or Keith, either Keith or Steve was the expert.
Both
And now
of
they
them
both
are
aren't
retired.
there anymore, so.
Yeah.
We
Chris,
have,
I saw you on mute. I didn't know if you.
yeah, if that was
wanted
a
to address
question,
that.
we haven't done like a comprehensive, capital improvements analysis of the sewer system for some time. I think we all have a sense of what the major needs of the sewer system are, but I do think it's been some time since we've had an engineer do a study on the sewer system. And by some time, I mean 8 years, I think, 2015 or 2014, maybe. So it has been some time, but our operators have, always told us in recent years that the sewer system is generally in good shape, and we don't think there are urgent upcoming capital improvement projects the sewer system needs in general.
Yeah, the trouble with that statement is urgent.
Right,
And
absolutely.
because we know in the medium term, I'll take medium 10, 15 years, there will be problems that will have to be addressed, which will cost money. And so accounting for those, I think, is appropriate.
Yeah, look, I don't think it matters that. Here's my net conclusion on that. We don't think we need to do any major capital expenditure on the sewer projects right now, but we actually don't know because we haven't had an expert look at it for a long time. I would say I don't really care what you put into the capital charge right now for the sewers, but I do think it's probably prudent for us to think about adding a analysis project from an outside expert. This is all about, if we're going to do multi-year budgets and multi-year stuff, we have to spend a little bit more money on the planning. And 8 years is a long time. So, if we can get it done next year, great. If we can't, we ought to tee it up to do it the year after.
So I just
Well,
did,
and that's, oh, go ahead.
I just did a quick number crunch, and if we put $10,000 into the sewer infrastructure, this, instead of being $79 per month, it would go up to 84. So roughly, $4,
Yeah,
$5 increase for that $10,000 per month per customer, or per ECU value of 1.25. So if that seems reasonable to you guys, I'll include that in the next version of this.
That's to me.
Those to me. The missing ingredient is really, and this gets back to sort of this CapEx, ramping up the CapEx, our ability to execute CapEx projects. We're tackling a big project in the water fund. The water fund actually, we could end up doing $400,000 or $500,000 worth of projects this year, which is fantastic. The water fund list though is $3 million, $4 million. So, I mean, there's a lot of wood to chop ahead, but I'm thrilled that we're tackling $500,000 worth of projects this year. But the missing ingredient, as Craig says, is really understanding what those expenses are going to be down the road. And do we have a comprehensive list of the projects we're going to face over the next 10 years? And I would say in the water fund, we have a list. It was comprehensive when we did it in 2011, then updated in 2014. The pricing, though, nobody knows. And that's why I've never been able to try to add more definition in those out years. I just sort of take whatever we know what we're going to do in the next year or two. If it's ever left to do, I say, well, that over the balance of the term of the analysis, and I divided it into equal shares. So, I mean, that was a pretty rudimentary approach. So I will offer having a study at some point.
I did include, there is around, I don't know what a study would cost for that, but there is $8,000 in that annual operating budget for a project in the sewer department. So that number could be increased, but there's a little bit of a cushion there for something like that for us to get started with. Other questions about the tentative 24 budget?
Well, there's not a question, it's a comment. I think you've done a terrific job in laying this stuff out.
Anything additional that you'd like? I mean, I have a few notes here on stuff to work on, fund balances and whatnot, those changes we talked about. Is there anything else that you would like to see before the June 21st meeting?
I just have one general question. At the last meeting, we were talking about 174,000 of wage increases. We now think that number is less than 100,000. And are we, what led to that reduction? And are we feeling good about it? And are the people that work for us feeling good about it?
Yeah, so what I did in this version of the budget, and it mainly only applies to the admin department, is that based on the rate we're paying our interim town manager and the lack of having a fourth staff person for I anticipated 3 months. I've kind of backed those numbers out so that I feel like it's a more realistic number based on our staffing plan. Other than that, all of the wages that have been proposed by the mayor and department heads are included in this budget.
Thank you for that response.
I think the short version is that this budget reflects the wage study that Craig instituted and the corrections that went with that.
And then also just, the wage study is, again, based on a certain number of hours per year, the 2080 hours, a normal 40-hour work week or whatever. And it's a little different for the marshal's department, it's a little higher, but that study is based on that. When I go to budget, I have to budget for, you know, some extra circumstances, overtime and extra pay and things like that. So that's why those numbers aren't always lining up perfectly.
I think those are great answers. You're telling us that the department heads are content with
Yes.
the wage adjustments.
Yeah, I think, you know, there will be more work to do, you know, if you remember the graph that we were seeing in the wage study, you know, we're trying to get people towards that median. And I anticipate the mayor probably making some suggestions for increases, you know, in the future for some staff that didn't make it as far up on that graph in this round, on the next round.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a moral obligation to pay people competitive wages, and that's where I am on that. Mike, you've from time to time caused my blood pressure to go up or my concern level to go up when you talk about the kind of infrastructure that you need in terms of particularly in communication and emergency communications. Are you comfortable with our funding of those in this round?
Yes, I think if the operating and CapEx budgets are approved as proposed, that will address our short-term critical needs, and by short-term, I would say, yeah, 5-year.
Okay, good. All right, we had a hint this year of what a real catastrophe could be. And while we've survived it, it was because of incredible work by a lot of people.
Well, thank you. I might add that outside of the communications realm, we've got to take a hard look at the facilities that we operate out of. We've had a number of our systems, particularly this last season, put to the test, and you know, we can't do everything out of the car.
Yeah. I mean, for Craig and John's interest, there was some thought of having to evacuate Alta Central building in April because of the threat of having it swept away. And that's pretty spooky.
All the more reason to accelerate our study on the community center and figure out what that's going to cost.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much for your time. Thanks for your thoughtful input into, you know, a lot of sensitive projects and yeah, so just thank
We
you.
want to have some sort of a motion that we approve the draft subject to the couple of changes.
Do we need that?
I don't know that we need that or not.
I was under the impression that the budget committee is supposed to formally recommend to the council the budget.
I would say that would be general practice,
Yeah,
but I don't think we've been doing it at the town of Alta.
I don't think there's any action there's no action on the agenda. So, you know, it's always best to have, you know, potential action items listed on the agenda. I don't know if there's any statutory reason or a reason in the town of Alta code why the budget committee would need to take action at this point, but.
We
Well-
haven't done that in the past since I've been on the committee, so I don't know if we should or have to, but if we are going to start doing that, we need to have it on the agenda for sure.
and if you want to go in that direction, we were actually going to schedule an hour before the June 21st meeting, especially since the other council members are not at this meeting to talk about the budget. So what I could do is I could do like a 15-minute or whatever budget committee meeting, and we could put that on the agenda for that portion. And you guys could make a formal recommendation that then gets carried through. We could do it that way if you wanted.
That
What
makes
else
sense.
is happening in that hour? I'm sorry, I missed that. We're
Uh,
gonna have an hour workshop before the meeting. Not all about the budget. It's gonna be
no,
about
all
other
about
stuff.
the budgets. Yeah.
Well, we can do it at the end of that.
I don't think that the budget committee advancing this document to the council is really a legislative action. And my take is that there's nothing wrong with you all administratively doing that and saying so.
Well, I get the hint here that we don't really need to have a motion at this point, but that if this is aired at the work session that precedes our June 21st town council meeting, that will be adequate. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, and we don't. I mean, we have a couple of substantive changes potentially, and it's probably good to let the dust settle a little bit and do it after the next meeting.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all very much.
Are we ready to wind up? Anybody else have anything to add?
Great work, Jen.
Yes,
Great
indeed.
work. It's the best budget package I've ever read. Then the town of Alta prevails. It was well organized, lots of new features, well organized budget. Really great work.
And what I do anticipate is that, some of these materials that we prepared for this meeting will be updated and included to the item on like the tax stuff and the shuttle. I think we'll forward that on to the next meeting so that the council is aware of that too. And the public sees that stuff.
Okay. Let's see. John needs to get back to rowing in the
The galley. I'm down in the galley.
yeah, right.
Ben-Hur, like Ben-Hur.
And Craig and
Yeah.
get
We
back
need a
to
motion.
the Craig back to the coronation aftermath, whatever that is.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Yes, okay, there's a motion to adjourn. Any seconds?
Second.
All right.
No, I
Okay,
did it.
Well, I'm not a town council member, but yeah.
You are a member of the budget committee though, Craig.
Okay,
Yes.
then I will second because that is my favorite part of the meeting.
okay. Any objections? In that case, we're adjourned and thank you all.